Hope people can hear me. So I used to open up each video saying "Привіт, мой друзі," and I've learned to say that. And sometimes I slaughtered, especially early on. It was essentially Ukrainian for "Welcome, my friends" or "Hello, my friends." And I, I I stopped doing that because I just started jumping right into my topic of whatever we were talking about. What I'm talking about right now is today is day 500. 500 days. Like, wrap your mind around that 500 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. And I think we ought to take pause and step back and think, like, wow, 500 days. Like, where were you 500 days ago? Like, what was that like? It seems like it's not a long time ago, but it seems like it's a long time ago simultaneously. I don't know how to describe that better than that. It's very strange. Um, and when I was let me back up 500 days and a week. I'm sitting in a cafeteria talking to my professor buddies around the cafeteria table, just eating lunch, and we're talking about, will Putin invade? No, Putin won't invade. That's crazy. That's not going to happen. And lo and behold, yeah, it happens. And I was as surprised as anybody else. I mean, I didn't think I thought he was just trying to get some concessions. This is what he does. He's done it before, and there we are. And then I go to an academic conference on day four, well, day minus one. Okay, if we go back 500 days plus one, and I'm at the academic conference, I'm watching the news, same as before. I wake up the next morning and on the news, Putin has invaded. So this is February 23rd, and I'm going to 23rd to 24th, right? And what just happened? I'm at breakfast talking to another conference participant. Like, did you just see the news? Like, and we're just shocked that Putin actually did what he did. And so it's been a really interesting time because, like, I think most of the world was caught off guard by this. And people that say, well, no, I saw it, they weren't saying that ahead of time. Most For the most part, at least, they weren't saying it ahead of time. So I want to take a little trip down memory lane and think about, like, just how far these guys have come since the beginning of the war. Like, the beginning was a shock. Okay, so pull up this CNN, the CNN article talking about, like, all the, like, a timeline of things. So Putin announces this special military operation on February 24th. We all remember that, right? And then we see the beginning, the rolling over the border kind of thing, and then we see Snake Island very shortly thereafter, right? And we all know what happened at Snake Island. Go surrender. Nope, not going to do that. And then after Snake Island, you see I mean, this is all the same day. This is still February 24th. You see the airport battle, and, like, wow, like, what just happened? Like, they were serious about this. They're trying to take the airport, and then you see Zelensky the next day, and so this is what captured the world's imagination. And I think this is very important in as far as leadership goes, saying the president is here, we're all here, our military is here, citizens and society are here, we're all defending our independence, our state, and it will remain so. Right? That "Yatut," I am here, that was huge, right? That's Zelensky the first day, and this is when everybody's looking around like, what do we do? Like, some people have already deployed, but everybody else is very nervous, going, what's going to happen? And when Zelensky did that, I took notice, and I thought, wow, that's something. Like, he's just signed his own death warrant. Like, I thought it was all over for him. But so did the CIA when they're providing him a ride out, or the U.S. Government is providing him a way out. And what happens with that? We all know this is a pretty well known story, right? This is now there are refugees at the border, and then there's the Irpin Bridge being destroyed, and people underneath it, huddling underneath it for protection. Um, those kind of events start to happen. But when he's offered a ride out, says, I need ammunition, not a ride. I stood up and took notice. I went, whoa, okay, who's this guy? Oh, wait, he's the guy that was the president of Ukraine when the Trump, like I could connect the dots somewhat to the Trump impeachment. Like he didn't really do anything. I just remember, seeing him in the White House, shaking Trump's hand in file clips and things along those lines. But I need to understand who Zelensky is. So I spent the next 3 weeks um, working on a Amazon ebook, just because I'm fascinated by leadership. I teach leadership. This is what I do, and so I spent this time on that ebook. In fact, um, hold on a second. This is the ebook. If anybody's interested in it, it is free if you have like Amazon Kindle Unlimited. Like if you have subscribed to Prime, and that's intentional to set it real cheap like that. It's just a few bucks, or it's free on Amazon Unlimited. But I spent the next 3 weeks like telling Zelensky's backstory, like how he came to power, and he was a really interesting character, with his background. And he got a law degree, but then he spent his time in comedy and working on TV and movies. And when he came into power, somebody reminded me of this the other day. When he came to office, he's talking to the Verkhovna Rada, and he says, and this is before the war, and he says, take my picture off your wall and replace it with a picture of your family. And when you're making a decision, look at your kids and make your decision based on that. And he came in looking at like trying to be a reformer, and he was a fairly unsuccessful reformer. And he had like a 25% approval rating in the fall before Putin invaded, which is his approval rating is now 91%. But that's not the greatest way to get a high approval rating. Um, and so, yeah, so I was telling his backstory, and then each week I was updating that book through about July or August, and that's when I shifted gears, opened up in June. I'd started dabbling with like, what if I did these daily updates, and did these daily updates on YouTube so that people could see this and understand this, and that's how I got started. So that was about 11 months ago where I got on YouTube and started doing this. Like I was doing on YouTube before that. I was doing these um, uh, um, videos just about leadership stuff, because nope, didn't get a lot of traction, but it was therapeutic for me. It was helping me process and think through things. And so I have another channel that was just that. Okay. At any rate, so that's where we were about this time last year. Let me look at some of your questions here, and then we're gonna just go through any questions that you have about anything. 500 days, I'll try to answer. Okay. So I can remember that moment when it happened. Turn on the PC and on unused workspaces, and turn on Sky News and YouTube, and PC's production levels were low. That I bet they were, right? Let's see here. Uh, Good day. What an incredible leader Zelensky is. Yeah, and I've come to appreciate that it's not just Zelensky, but it's the Ukrainian people that. So something clicked for me when I was interviewing Starsky. This was about 2 months ago, and he said, "Yeah, well, Ukrainians, we self." I don't know what was the word he used. He self deploy or something along those lines. And like everywhere we go, we try to improve things. It's just part of the character. And Zelensky gets all the credit he deserves. Like he should get all the credit, but he's emblematic of the people. He's not just a rare specimen, and I've come to appreciate that over time. Russia seems to be playing. Where is Wally with war criminal Prigozhin? Yeah, that's what's going on. I don't know. You're asking me a question that I don't know how I can tell you something that no other experts can figure out. But why he would go back to Russia seems to be a mystery to me. Um, what will Ukraine show in NATO summit next week? They're waiting for a successful counteroffensive. Yeah, they wanted to have something to prove before the NATO summit, and they don't. Now, you got to understand that where they are is a very difficult position. And Zelensky's got a really tough needle to thread. He said something where he was complaining like we didn't get munitions in time in order to have the counteroffensive start when it was supposed to start. But he's got to not sound like a whiner and complain about that, even though that is a true statement. He doesn't have an air force, and so they have to. I like so the cluster munitions are to allow them to have some kind of potential that they otherwise don't have. Um, they can't really take the ground with the tanks coming in until they clear things out because they don't have the air force to be able to have the air cover to make sure that they're protected. So it's like if John Cotter is a Harvard professor, and he wrote a book, Leading Change, where he talks about like if you look around in my background, right? This is my office, my home office, right? And in my office, if you had a desk and a chair and bookshelves and whatever, and they're tied together by that's Patrick Henry's "I Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech on the wall back there. In case you ever wondered what was behind my head, and that's just been there for years. I didn't set it as a stage for anything. So now imagine that there are invisible rubber bands holding everything together. And if you move one thing, like you move that chair back there, it will pull on the bookshelf, or it'll pull on a desk, or it'll open a desk drawer or whatever. Or if you move my desk, it'll do, something else. That's kind of the way that it's working. Like that's how things work in an organization. So when you make one organizational change, it affects everything else. You can't really see what's going to happen, but you can anticipate if you understand that. Same kind of thing here. If they don't have air cover, air superiority, all kinds of other things go wrong, and they have to work this out. Okay, so what will they say? Well, they won't be able to say what they would like to say is that, see, we've taken all this ground, but they have taken some ground, which is pretty impressive given their constraints. And they are working at it, and they're systematically going about it, and they have to be judicious about how they're going to do it. Okay, a lot of you are showing up and coming in and saying hello. So for the new people, I just said 500 days. I'm willing to talk about anything, any questions you have over the last 500 days. What are your questions? I see one question up here. How can Russian war manufacturing be degraded further? So it's going to be hard to go in and attack their buildings, so they have to do that through sanctions. But some sanctions are not working so well because they're going in through, like, I saw some reports about how we sell dual use kind of chips, computer chips that can just be used in computers, but they can also be used in missiles, to Kazakhstan, and then they turn around and they export it to Russia because they're making money. So trying to clamp down on those holes is the best thing that they can do. On the other hand, there's kind of a race here, and part of the race is just 2 days ago, there was an interesting article about Russian 2 days, 3 days, Ukrainian drone manufacturing. They had 7 companies making drones in Ukraine before the war began. Now they have upwards of 40, and they hope to have 50, and they hope to produce 200,000 drones by the end of the year, I think it was, or something, something phenomenal like that. Okay, so let me take your questions. I will again answer anything of the last 500 days. Let's see. Good morning, Cheryl. It's way early where you are. Okay, could I please put an emphasis on why it's important not to be apolitical on this subject? Not to be apolitical. Can you explain what you mean by apolitical, colorless circle? Because I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure that I do. Zelensky visited Snake Island on day 500. I didn't see that. That may have been, if he did. I did not read that yet. I just got up and started, getting my stuff together so that I could do this and meet with you all. But I have not seen that yet. You're correct, Professor. There's still trade in several of the stand countries importing goods into Russia. So the stand countries are interesting, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and all the other stands, because they're simultaneously moving away from Putin, and Putin says something and they don't jump. They're like, maybe we're not coming to this conference, or we're going to make Putin wait. Like, wow, that was pretty interesting to see that. But they're also, they're willing to make money and provide Russia with the things that they need. Okay, so Colorless Circle again said, yeah, when you ask someone from, say, France what they think about the war in Ukraine, and they say it's not my problem, I believe a stance. I'm sorry. I believe that stance is worse than being Vatnik. Could you please elaborate? Yeah. So this willingness to ignore it. I've been thinking about this. So Zelensky has had a problem with trying to get some countries, particularly African and South American. South America just there was a South American European conference that was about to take place or just took place, and they were going to have a joint statement. And the South American, the Latin American nations wanted to take the references to Ukraine off of it. They didn't want to be involved, and I kind of get it with I mean, if you're Chile, let's say, I mean, I don't know that Chile has any strong feelings one way or another. Obviously, like Venezuela and Nicaragua and others that are chummy with Russia would have it. But if you're, let's say, Chile, um, you can kind of afford to say, it's not my problem. The U.S. we can't, right? Like, so people in the U.S. when they're saying, um, well, it's not my business. Well, that's kind of the price of leadership. You got to be involved. Like you've got to step up now, because if you want all the benefits of the free trade that you enjoy and being able to have world markets, now's the time where you really have to step into it. But some people can afford to. Now, Russian citizens tend to do that because they've been beaten down. But if you're France and Germany, like, it's going to come to you eventually if you don't deal with it. Like this is that classic. Let's not turn a molehill into a mountain. And if you deal with it now, that's far better than dealing with it later. You can pay now or you can pay later. And I just think it's very short-sighted, and it's very short-sighted when Americans are doing that too. But we've had isolationists before every war. We had loyalists during the Revolution. About 20% were loyalists, and we had isolationists before World War II. So it's nothing new. Okay, do you think it's true that the USA were slow to provide arms to Ukraine because they thought that Ukraine was going to be overthrown very quickly, and USA didn't want to lose military technology to Russia? Okay. So it's interesting the way that you put that, you phrase that, because I think U.S. analysts really did think that this, Zelensky was going to be run out in a matter of just a few weeks. And I say, so I think that's why Zelensky's "I'm here" Yatut was so important, and why his I don't need I need ammunition, not a ride. Why that was so powerful, because I heard him say that, and I thought, wow, that guy's just signed his own death warrant. Like he's going to go down fighting, but he's going to go down. That was my initial impression. Um, Nobody knew that Russia was going to fight as ineptly as they did, and that the Ukrainians were going to put up such a powerful resistance as they did. But I don't think that necessarily, except maybe in the very early days, prevented it. I think it's the prevention, the slowness of getting arms to Ukraine was more because Putin was actually really successful at deterring the West. And I hate to say that, but he really was. And you'll notice, by the way, when I talk about Putin, I'm not like Putin, he's so dreamy, like Ritter or something like that. I'm just trying to dispassionately explain what I see. And I don't think that the West was served well by listening to Putin about his saber rattling, and he did a good job. And that took a long time to get tanks and to get longer range missiles and to get this and that and the other thing. So I've got to give Putin credit where credit's due. So okay. Colorless Circle again. Yes, thank you. I overlook countries that have little to no ties with the war in my question. I did mean countries directly involved in one way or another. And France, like, would legitimately be like, hey, look, you got to step up. France and Germany, particularly, have a dominant role in the EU, and they really do need to be leading in the same way that the US can't abdicate either. Germany, I understand being a little slow or a little pacifist. We've kind of required that since World War II. Like, look, we're not going to be going down that kind of path again. And if they did nothing, if they didn't give any tanks at all, and they just like were like, we're going to be the leaders in humanitarian aid, I would have been like, cool, like we get it. But they still need to step up because this is their backyard. And this is the part of the argument that the isolationists in America have. Look, that's your war. That's not ours. And it's true. It is your European war. It's not ours. But there's a leadership role here that needs to be like, if you're going to have it in one context, you got to have it in the other. And so they just need to step up. Okay. Let's see here. Can Ukraine afford, where is that? I just missed one. Can Ukraine afford to fight 2 more years? Can Russia afford to fight 2 more years? It's going to be a longer time. I don't think it's going to be over in 2023, and that will not make me popular. But I think I'm accurate, and I hope that I'm wrong. But it's going to be a long, hard slog, and it's like the counteroffensive is a longer, harder slog than it has to be because they don't have the same equipment that they would have, like if they had air superiority, like being able to go in and call in an airstrike and be like, okay, here are the coordinates. Take that out. It's not as easy when you're relying on artillery than when you have air superiority. Um, Jake Bro said something important in my mind. It's about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant yesterday, the day before. Did I see it? I am one day behind on Jake, and I watched Jake religiously. It's great stuff. He does a good job on analyzing things. So I might have missed it, but he also, like me, tends to repeat himself because there are certain important points. So clarify for me, if you will. But Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is in all the articles about like, hey, look, this is really dangerous. It could be a problem. They you Now, as I understand, they're down to one reactor. So while they have 6 or 8 reactors, whatever it is, only one is actually functioning, and they haven't shut down that one. And the guy in charge there the Russian in charge has refused to shut the one down, and they still need water to cool, even if it is shut down. So that's what we know, and that's my great fear. I don't. I have very little fear, at least at this point, that what Russia is going to do is deploy send a missile with a nuclear weapon or send an airplane with a nuclear weapon or something like that. I don't think that's it. But if you look at what just happened with the dam, they could let an accident happen and then from the accident blame Ukraine. See, Ukrainian special forces did this thing, or even pretend like send like little soldiers in dressed up in Ukrainian uniforms from the other side just before the thing happens or whatever. I think that's not outside reality's possibility. I don't know that will happen, but okay. Germany appears to still be divided. Support for Russia is higher in the former East Germany. That's mind-boggling to me. They also tend to vote more extreme political parties in higher numbers. Like that, those that were so East Germany is one of the few places that was so dominated by Russia that is still like pro-Russian. Like, so where's the support come from? It comes from the Baltic states, like Lithuania, who is also part of Russia in one sense, and they don't want to ever go back to that. Poland, you know, these kind of states that experience the worst of it, or tend to be those that are more hawkish. Is it going to spend? Oh, whoops! Something just moved. Wow. Okay, I'm a little bit behind here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to answer whatever your questions are. What's the acceptable number of Ukrainians to die in minefields before they stop sending conscripts to die for zero gains? Okay, so this is when you see a troll, and his name is Aiken Vale. So I'm not going to answer him from this point forward because I think that is, I mean, it's almost a Russian talking point, almost exactly. So well done, troll, for doing your job. You can take this video to your masters and whatever, and you might not actually be an actual troll, but you're repeating a Russian talking point. So the alternative to that is you give up, and then you have a good 17% of your territory now in the hands of someone that's going to abuse your people. And if you're in charge, you should feel that responsibility and not allow that to happen to them. Is going to get it. Okay, so wow. Okay, Germany. Yeah, I just talked about Germany. Putin learned a lesson from U.S. withdrawal in Afghanistan, but it was the wrong lesson. Now Ukrainians resisted like the Taliban. Now Putin's embroiled long term. Well, I'm not exactly excited about that analogy. But yeah, that's right. Putin is embroiled. He thought it was going to be 3 weeks, and it turned out to be 500 days plus and counting. And so, but part of that is that Putin was getting bad information because he's an authoritarian, and he's in the culture that allows authoritarians, and so that's part of what happened here. And if Putin had the information of what was going to happen, I don't think he ever would have done it. But now he's kind of stuck in the system, and he has no appetite to get out, just like Zelensky has no appetite to get out. Deuce just said, who destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline? And if it was the USA, did they do it behind Germany's back? I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. That's not a weasel answer. I have no proof one way or another. Now, here's what you want to watch out for. When people are saying, it's the USA did it, or Poland did it, or Ukraine did it, or Russia did it, or what, like, the dogmatic statements that are made without proof, those are people that you should probably watch less. Not that you shouldn't watch them, but you should just take them with a grain of salt, because, like, why are they saying it without proof? Like, show us your citation, so show us your sources if that's correct. Germany is not longer like the past, no longer like the past. Don't expect Germany to have a big role in World War III. Right. I understand that Germany's not like the past, and they have worked hard to get away from the past. And that's good. Aiken says, what's acceptable number? Oh, we already talked about that, and we're going to ignore him from this point forward. The willingness to ignore this war or anything else is happening in the world is common. People are absorbed by their own lives and don't take the time to look beyond the close. Or, yeah, that's right. I mean, most people, if they have a hangnail, they're more like concerned about that than they are about, a hurricane that killed X number of people in a foreign land. That's like how humans are. John Hoover, accidental medic. What has been interesting to see is a transformation of Ukrainian military. That's exactly right. From 224-22 to now, the chaos at the beginning of the war has been given way to a well-trained professional army. I joked when I talked to Starsky. We did that collaboration about 2 months ago. I said, so at the end of this, is NATO going to be allowed to join Ukraine? and he didn't quite get it at first, and then he got the joke and chuckled, like Ukraine's army is pretty powerful, like pound for pound. It's kind of like, just it's been amazing what they've been able to do, and they can use pretty much all Russian or Soviet era weapons and NATO weapons that they've been trained on, and so they're going to be pretty powerful. Okay, Peter. Sorry. Yeah, Peter Zihan on Russian demographics versus Ukrainian genocide. So yes, I mean, if you go far enough, Zihan's right, but I don't know that we're to that point where we've gone far enough that it's that Ukraine is going to be like totally just wiped out and that kind of thing. That is a theoretical possibility, but I can imagine a world without theoretical possibilities. That's a joke. And so you got to be careful when you're an academic that you don't like. You have to have a certain humility to see things that are not the way that you see things. And Zion also is one of these guys that, while he's deep and I appreciate some of his thoughts, he's got to step back from Zihan himself. Serenity Nuclear Experts on Jake's show. The one I missed, right? I'll have to circle back to that later on today. Ukraine has half of their offensive forces staged in Bakhmut, 60,000 troops, meaning they gave up on Zaporizhzhia front. I don't know, but they are making huge gains around Bakhmut. I don't believe that there's half there. Half of their troops are really in reserve, as far as everything that I've understood. Tone says it's not that danger, like he said before. It's not that that a danger, like you said before. It's not in such danger, is I guess what you're saying. Yeah, that maybe I don't know. Okay, World War One lasted 4 years and ended through attrition. Short version: expect this war to last as long. Both sides are entrenched, slow progress, taking down the defenses. Um, but there are different. Um, Yeah, so you're kinda onto something, but I don't think it's quite fair to say that it's going to be done just like World War One because different military technology. Just imagine how drones have changed things, let alone anything else. And so there's going to be different technology that's going to change the game, and we don't know exactly what it is, but it's not like we just dug in on both sides and just have our trenches and are just like, okay, let's cross no man's land. And so I think it'll just be different. The difference here in this war is so roll back the clock to World War II. When my dad was a child, he would be watching, he'd go to the movies and they'd have a newsreel before the movie itself. And they would actually sometimes go for the newsreel as much as the movie to see what was going on. In Vietnam, you'd get film on TV piped into your home. We get things in almost real time, like it's pretty impressive. I don't just mean counteroffensive kind of stuff. Like they're being a little hush hush about some of the counteroffensive things, but like when Prigozhin's coup, mutiny, freedom march, whatever you call it, started, like within an hour, I knew. Right. Some of you all were tipping me off, and I'm like watching between four different live streamers to find out what's going on. So this is a really interesting thing to watch in real time and be able to understand and diagnose. Okay, um, let's see. Mr. Kilted. Did I miss something? Ukraine has half their troops. Yeah, I don't. So I don't think that Bakhmut there's half their troops there, but I mean there are some concentrations. Mr. Kilted, we talked about. Of course, is Big Bad John. Jake explained that the reactor type was different in Chernobyl. Basically, will automatically shut down if water is removed. Yeah, but there's still potential threat. It's not as bad as we thought, and it's shut down, but it's not as yeah. I'm no military or nuclear expert, right? I tell you that up front. Serenity, it uses water to cool down. Oh, just popped up a bunch. Wow, I'm way behind. Okay, I'm sorry that I'm way behind, guys. I'm just trying to answer all the things I can answer. Um, yeah, I am way behind. Have you seen the well, yeah, okay. Use water. If we don't end the war, it will end us. And yeah, I mean, but if you allow tyrants to do what they're doing, they will continue to do it and it'll just get worse. And so you got to do something about that. Jennifer says, have you seen the economic theory that a nation can engage in total war for 4 years before financial resource and physical exhaustion? The theory came out after World War One. So I don't think um, I don't think the scenario really holds. Russia, I don't think is a total war, and so they can go a lot longer. And Ukraine, while they are at war, they're being supplied by outside by the West, and they can go a lot longer. And for Ukraine, it's an existential threat, and so they have the will to fight longer. So it's a different kind of scenario. Aiken Vale is saying he's not a troll. Aiken, you might not be a troll, but you might still be a repeater, like a repeater, like a power station or like a antenna that is repeating the message of because that's really the message. Like, what is the alternative to like just roll over? Is that a good idea? I don't think it is. And then when the Russians just decide that they're going to want to go into Moldova and then go beyond that, like where does it stop? Like we should have done something in 2008 with Georgia. Had we intervened with Georgia, 2014 wouldn't have happened. Probably it's counterfactual. We can't actually prove that, but like not doing something there, I remember that clearly and thinking like it's really bad. All we said were strong words like don't do that. That's not good. And lo and behold, here we are years later. Um, okay, how is Crimea supplied with water and electricity today? Do not know that. I can't tell you that. What's your feelings about USA providing cluster bombs to Ukraine? Russia are using them. I have very mixed emotions. I have mixed emotions about a lot of things, right? So let's look at this side first. I think it's horrible in one sense. that it's indiscriminate in the way that it blows up, and it can go out so many different directions. It's a pretty powerful weapon. Um, and it's horrible that there's a fraction. The US claims that only 2.5% of them don't go off with theirs. It could be upwards of 10%, I understand. And then, a little kid could be playing in the park later on and it blows up. So, and I'm actually working on another video about this. So I'm actually thinking through the kinds of things I'll be talking about there. So cluster munition. So it's banned by 123 countries, and it goes and it could be a thing that civilians stumble on later. But understand this: the Russians have used them; they're using them to some effect. The Ukrainians don't have the air force, so they need these other weapons to be able to fight back. So that's part of it. Um, and you're saying, well, what about what happens later? The Russians have mined essentially the territory the size of the state of Florida. Like, get that into your mind. The Russians have mined the land, so they have to clear the land about the size of the state of Florida. These extra cluster munitions are not going to be that big of a thing compared to just what the Russians have done themselves. I mean, it's adding to the problem certainly when there are extra pieces, but and so Ukraine's about the size of Texas, about the size of Florida has been mined by Ukraine, by Russia, and so I mean, I'm thinking it's like one evil to fight another, but this evil's on your side, helping you kill the evil. Um, an analogy that popped into my head is it's almost like radiation and cancer treatment, right? I mean, if you have cancer and you have to go under radiation treatment, it's not good. You're kind of killing yourself, but you're hoping to kill the cancer cells before you kill you, and that's kind of how I see it. I hope that helps. I caught your chat, Professor, saying the best way to deal with troll is just to ignore, which is basically they will go away if you do. And generally speaking, yes, I read that and then I had to answer it. So now I don't have to deal with him anymore. And I found that to be largely true. And by the way, if a Prigozhin troll factory closes down, you get less trolls. I mean, it was really interesting. A number of us were comparing notes behind the scenes, and you saw Johnny Pierce and I talk about that. Like, hey, did you see the trolls dry up? Yeah, the troll factory kind of went away for a little while, and then it was only the repeaters, the Russus saying whatever was in RT or other media. Okay, mines are probably Russia's best defensive weapon that they have. It's definitely slowing Ukraine down. It won't stop them. I agree, it won't stop them. So I'm going to skip this repeater troll type. And again, I'm not saying he's a paid Russian troll. I'm saying he's repeating those talking points. I would like to see the U.S. government explain to the American people the reason that we need to be involved here, because we are contributors to the situation by our actions. So they have actually laid out that case, and I think Zelensky's laid out that case really well. He has, when he's talked to each government, like if you go back and watch, it's on YouTube, so go back and watch him speak to Congress and make it lay out his case. And so Zelensky is essentially saying the fight is here, but it's going to expand. If they take Ukraine, it's going to expand. It's going to become your fight. You're going to be drawn into this. Mike Pence has done a good job explaining how this works and why while it's their issue there, it could become our issue if we don't contain it there and deal with it there as we need to. Loren says East Germans have a different narrative about their time in the DDR compared to other Warsaw Pact countries. Unification has been a difficult process, so there is nostalgia and possibly some whitewashing. Well, certainly there must have been some whitewashing. It was not a good thing to be living under the Russian domination. I remember seeing a cartoon in like Newsweek or Time or something like that after the reunification of Germany, and it was this huge fat businessman embracing this emaciated woman in tattered clothes and hugging as the two sides reunited. And I thought, that's really probably a pretty compelling picture. I mean, the cartoonist really caught it and understood what was going on. Let's see. Scott says, yeah, that's a wind-up statement dished out without no proof. Source to back it up. Good. Good. I love when I see you guys when there's a troll out there or somebody that's a repeater, just regurgitating talking points saying cite your sources. And I do this too. When in the comments people will say, "Well, Radio Free Europe is not a legitimate source." Okay, so what sources do you think I should read? And they never answer me. I have yet to have them answer me because what are they going to say? Like TASS, RT? I mean, they're not going to do that. Okay. Um, Jason says, "What do you think about the extreme left and extreme right becoming aligned over Ukraine?" Um, Not much, because there's more support for Ukraine now than there's been in a long time. In the very beginning, there was a lot. It kind of dipped down, and it's kind of come back up in the U.S. polling recently. Cheryl says Silicon Curtain has an American mercenary who said covert operations to disrupt the Russian military command is the only way. What of that? Maybe I'm not a military expert. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure they're thinking through all scenarios. Um, let's see. Michael Dimitrov says that was the wrong lesson Putin learned. Afghanistan repeated itself, but not the way that he thought. Now Russia is bleeding even more than the U.S. Bled in Afghanistan. Yeah, it's like if you're Putin, now help me with something, and I'm going to skip down to the comments in real time because it's a long way. No, well, it's not that long. It's a little bit. And what I want to do is, if you have another question, I want you to repeat. But right now, I want to ask you a particular question. Okay, I want you to tell me. So I keep hearing and reading in RT and TASS and those kind of things, Russian media sources. Putin is so strong. Look how he's thwarted this. I don't see it that way. Most Western news says, look, there's chinks in the armor. Tell me how you see that Putin is weaker than you think. Now, if you think that he's strong, you can tell me, I think he's stronger because. But in the comments, tell me why you think he might be either stronger or weaker. He's weaker because blah, 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 or he's stronger because blah, blah, blah. Because I see him as weaker post Prigozhin. And the reason for that is that he's just it exposed something that we all thought like, wow, nobody could take on Putin. And then we're like, what just happened? So yeah, so he's frail and old. Yes, so that's part of it. So he's weaker because he's got these medical conditions, he's aging out, those kind of things. Okay. Uh Nobody else is answering that. They're talking about other stuff still. Put this in the comments if you can, because I want to have this discussion. Russian media drinks the Kool-Aid. That's right. They do. And because they're all on the same page, it's telling me that he is actually weaker than it seems. His mixed messages shows that he's not in charge. Yeah, the mixed messages are really strange. Um, a puppet? I don't know what that means. Okay. Any other comments about Putin being stronger or weaker? I'd really like to hear what you had to say. Um, because to my mind, he's just something's not right. Like, okay, so let's look at that. He's quarantined for a long time. I think COVID really messed with him. He's been still quarantining, even though the rest of the world has largely moved on. He's weaker after the March of Moscow because he looked weak. Yeah, like there's like this cycle here. Like if you look strong, you are stronger than you otherwise would have been. His strength is in the FSB, not in the military. Yeah, so he's got to be careful which subordinates he plays off which, and he really is kind of paranoid from what I can determine as well. Um, yeah, he looks weak now. He looks a lot weaker than he has. Um, Movable model of what's that? Putin ran to St. Petersburg. Yeah, so running away from Moscow, I don't know that he went to St. Petersburg, but running out of Moscow made him look very bad. I think Putin's like an old fighter, experienced and respected, but hitting the head way too often with a bunch of injuries, and he's progressively getting weaker naturally. It's bound to happen. I think there's something to that. And that doesn't mean he's not dangerous, but he's not what you think he was. Can't figure out what to do with Prigozhin. That's a weird sign, isn't it? Um, yeah, No nation in history that's not the right question. Who looks weaker, Putin or Biden? Wow, that's a difficult question because Biden has aged not well. But that's not my question. The fact that Putin is scrambling to distance himself from the war and trying to look popular as possible with the people in the far regions. That's an interesting sign as well. He's suffering from yes men. Very good point. He really is. And you're not, when you have that kind of problem, you're not seeing reality. Could you redefine her internally weaker? Well, yeah, weaker in the eyes of his international allies, weaker to countries supporting him. Yeah, all of those things, and weaker within his own to his own constituency. He's not. So, what triggered that thought was just seeing where there's a lot of people that will say in Russian media, "Oh, see how he's overcome," or see like his allies are saying he's in charge. He's looking like he's so strong. That chorus is telling me something's not right. The fact that these is not tax Sergei Shoigu makes me wonder who's in charge. Um, he and Sergei are pals, and what authoritarians and dictators and just bad leaders in general do is that they put their friends around them that they trust because loyalty is more important than competence, and so that's part of it. But now you're the other half of the equation is if you don't have competence in charge of the military, you have a whole different problem. I don't want him to fire Shogu. I want him to keep that incompetent guy in charge. FSB is in charge, but he also tends to isolate. That's right. Please discuss the conflict between Russian mafia elites and FSV. So, yeah, that's not something that I'm equipped to do, at least not at this time. Yeah, thank you all for your comments about Putin being weaker. In many ways, I see that he is, and I'm just not sure exactly how to skin that cat. Okay, 500 days. Any other questions? Put those in. I'll try to answer them as in like rapid fire a way as possible, and to answer everything that you have questions for. Please discuss the conflict between. We just talked about that. It looks like Putin is trying to find a new foothold as the Ministry of Defense and FSB are playing different games. It does look like they're not on the same page. There's continuity in place if Biden gets incapacitated. What's in place if Putin goes down in the same way? That's a good question. And we don't. Well, I'm sure there's some kind of succession plan, but it's. I don't know what exactly it is. What about Lukashenko's praise for Russia's nuclear weapons and the battle-hardened mercenary army coming into his state? He presents them as possible tools of power, but he does not control any of them. I think he's the only one that kind of makes sense because goes getting a private army to train his army to make them semi-competent as part of the deal. That's the only thing that made sense about that whole thing. He's weaker because he realizes his army is led by fools. I don't know. I'm not sure he does realize that. Do you think that there could be an uprising in Russia's Far East provinces? There could be, but I wouldn't predict it. I mean, I'm not going to rule it out, but I don't know. What do you do after Ukraine doesn't exist? Well, then I think that I don't know. I mean, after Ukraine doesn't exist, I don't see that as a possibility. I mean, there's no scenario that I can see. So this is Big Bad John arguing with folks here. I don't see it as a possibility. I don't think Russia has the ability to take all of Ukraine. I think Russia might be able to theoretically hang on to parts of it, but to wipe out all of Ukraine, short of a nuclear attack, which would then make Russia North Korea to the rest of the world forever and peel off China and India and essentially starve it out. I can't see. So I don't know. It's hard to answer a question that's that bizarrely off. Okay. Next question. Cheryl says, well, sorry, Cheryl, Putin punishes constructive criticism and reinforces incompetence. That's correct. I'd be more worried about your own country, Russia, John. Uh, what cluster munitions agreement are people referring to? This just came out yesterday, so if you're behind, no problem. It just came out yesterday that the U.S. was going to provide cluster munitions. And by the way, Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. all have not subscribed to that treaty. That was a 2010 treaty about cluster munitions. Um, the enforcer brothers, a good source of information about Ukraine. As far as I can see, there's some kind of big argument between enforcer and mercado, but I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it affects the bits that I've seen of the enforcer have been useful, but I can't. I'm no authority on the enforcer. Can you address the misinformation reference Nazis on both sides of the narrative? Well, there's not. So in World War II, there were Nazis, and you could say, "Where are the Nazis?" And they'd say, "We're Nazis," right? Uh, in Ukraine, the Russians say, "There are Nazis over there. Where are the Nazis?" And they're like, "I don't know. Where are the Nazis? We're not Nazis. We're the Nazis." So like there's their whole theory seems to be predicated on the fact that there are hidden underground Nazis that are like, ha ha ha, we're Nazis, but we're not telling you. And I don't think that that's a legitimate thing. There is a certain small subset of pretty much every population that has this kind of racist element, and that could be there's racists in Africa that don't like other races. Look at the Hutu and right, like in Rwanda, and Tutsi. So uh, this is a pretext more than anything else. And then there's also that they describe the Russians use the word Nazi to describe anybody who's anti-Russian. As so they use it loosely as well, and that's part of the problem. Okay, I'm getting away from myself here. Okay, let me go down toward further down. I'm sorry if I'm skipping some here. Russia's used cluster munitions for some time. That's correct. Russia has been using cluster munitions heavily in Ukraine for the last year and a half, and they also use thermobaric bombs, also prohibited, and they use chemical weapons. And they've, yeah, they. I read an article where they used chemical weapons and the wind blew it back on them, but it's not the best plan. Um, okay, so we are at about 52 minutes. So I'm going to wrap up before the hour's up. Any last questions that you just really have to get off your chest? 500 days of war. We've covered a lot of ground here. So tell me whatever else you see, or that is really important. History Legends is a Russian propaganda channel who's been wrong about nearly everything. I meant to do a reaction video to History Legends, and then something displaced it and took my attention away from it. That's just the way things work. But I hope to get to doing one of those shortly. Turkey's been providing cluster munitions to Ukraine, yes, quietly, for some time now, and the U.S. is doing it because we have a shortage of shells. That's part of it, but it will also allow them capability that they don't have, and like to when they. It's a pretty brutal weapon. They call Zelensky a Nazi. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, the whole Nazi thing is a red herring, so I wouldn't worry about that. Okay. Any other questions, comments, or snide remarks that you have for me? And we will start to wrap up. One request: have a great rest of the day, y'all. Well, that's good. I hope this was helpful to you in trying to understand what's going on. Thanks for engaging with me about is Putin really stronger or weaker or whatever? Nobody said stronger. And again, this is the Western view is like he's not stronger, and the Russian context they keep, oh well, he's look what he did, how strong he is, and they just can't seem to not praise Putin. It's a really interesting thing. All right, well, that's all that I'm going to say, and I'm going to be doing a video shortly on the cluster munitions, so look for that. And I found a RT video talking about how, see, the Americans, they're hypocrites, they're using these. Well, yeah, but they use them on the enemy. Video talking about how, see, the Americans, they're hypocrites, they're using these. Well, yeah, but they use them on the enemy. That's the difference. Like when you use your missiles on Lviv, that's a different thing. Well, here, and then one more question or two. Uh, I only wake up this early on a Saturday to watch Professor live. Oh, thank you. I'm trying to understand the U.S. position on Ukraine and NATO, Graham versus Biden. Um, I'm not sure that there's a lot of daylight between them. Biden and Graham are both pretty heavy supporters. And on cluster munitions, it's the Republicans that are far more in favor of it than Democrats. Let's see what else. Thank you for your videos. Will NATO join Ukraine? Yeah, it's a good question. It's pretty funny. All right, that's it. Thank you for your time. I will see you again soon. I really appreciate that you care enough about Ukraine to meet with me and ask these questions and try to understand. And I'll keep putting these videos out and trying to help you understand as well. Thanks, y'all. Bye bye.